Hi all you wonderful scuba divers, welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to Ask Mark, where I do my darndest to answer all of your scuba diving questions. If you've got any questions, by all means let me know down in the comments below. This week we're talking about long hoses and why we're using long hoses, recreational twin sets, dSMBs, brass Boltsnaps, XDEEP V Halcyon, and a very enigmatic question that I'll announce later on, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But let's jump straight in with the first question, which this week comes from Ariel Wiltker. And they say, hey Mark, whilst answering the question about regulator issues with a longer hose, which you said that there weren't, you didn't address why you dive with a 2-meter long hose. I'm curious why that is. Pros versus cons, love the channel, thanks. Thanks, yes. Yeah. So last week someone asked the question about if is there a performance drop if you go for a longer hose, and the way the pressure works is like there shouldn't be any at least noticeable sort of difference. If there was, then like commercial divers who have like really long umbilical hoses, they wouldn't do it. So pros and cons of well, there's your first con. It's a lot of hose to sort out. Pros and cons of a 2-meter. I mean, the blue one here is my 2-meter hose. So yeah, let me just untangle this. The main benefits is reach. So, God, Struth, so many hoses. Yeah. So it originally came from sort of cave exploration, and it's that sort of redundant extra like amount of space. It's all it really comes down to is if you're in a confined space where you can't swim side by side, it has to be single file. In an out of air situation, you can still donate to the diver in front or behind you, and they can still breathe from your cylinder with a 2-meter hose, because it goes down their entire body length or your entire body length, and you don't have to like either do a reverse turn and reverse out through this confinement or something. So that's really where it comes from. For me, the first instance where I sort of realized that I wanted a longer hose, especially to donate, was when I was teaching. We were doing like out of air ascents with a buddy. As the instructor, I was donating the gas. I just had a standard length octo hose, and yeah, we were like linking jackets and whatnot, and just swimming up facing one another. It was in a lake, everything was perfectly safe. But for whatever reason, I think I turned to check on my my dive master or something, and it just pulled that second stage out of their mouth just a little bit. And this was on like a 90-centimeter hose, the traditional length octo hose that you get like straight out of the box. And that just made me think, I could really do with a longer hose. And then in like research, I discovered like diving DIR in a DIR style setup with a long hose, and yeah, it just made much more sense to me. So yeah, apart from there just being a lot of hose, that kind of is the main downside, both when storing it and when wearing it, because you have to route your hose. Usually you hook it underneath something on your waistband and then up around the back of your neck and then into your mouth as a long hose primary donate. As long as you have that set up and the hose is routed nice and neatly, it's perfectly fine. I've dived with it countless times and it works, and it's quite intuitive to be able to sort of donate it just as fast as if you had a traditional sort of long hose alternate. So yeah, that's kind of it. It is mainly down to reach. In open water, you don't really need it. It is quite nice if someone's panicking or whatever, they can panic over there, and they're less likely to sort of just manhandle you and your equipment. They still have their air, they can still breathe, but it just gives you that extra little bit of sort of slack and breathing space, so you can do things a bit more like autonomously without them having to be literally on your hip. And that's the main sort of benefit for it. And yeah, the downsides are just managing that hose, making sure that it is contained and it's not flapping around, it's not flappy snack hazard. And yeah, that's it really. T. Bowen says, hey Mark, what are your thoughts on twin sets for recreational diving, and how would you suggest going about learning how to use a twin set safely and properly? Yeah, I tend to use my my twin set more and more for recreational diving. You have that redundancy built in. You have two independent first stages, so that should something go wrong, you have that redundancy. I quite like the stability of it. It's hard to explain, but instead of having like this one single so like heavy thing on your back, you have two heavy things on your back spread out a little bit. So I just find myself a bit more steady in the water. Picking them up sucks. I'm not going to lie about that. It's a lot harder to maneuver them around, but it does give you a good sort of excuse to buy one of those little trolley things to really manhandle them and move them around the dive site instead of just having to carry them one-handed. About learning, something like GUE fundamentals is probably the best way to do it. They'll definitely put you through your paces and teach you a lot about how twin sets work and how to use them the most efficiently in the most safe way possible. So that's probably the best way. It is something that you can just learn yourself, as with a lot of scuba diving things, but to do it as safely as possible, for most divers, yeah, it is definitely worth going down like a GUE style fundamentals course where they teach you about twin sets, how to set it up, how things work and how they've sort of come to that conclusion, how to set up your regulators for it as well, as opposed to just buying twin cylinders, just whacking regulators on and jumping in the water, because yeah, you can get stuck and you can end up hurting yourself. So yeah, you're doing the right thing and aren't asking the question. So yeah, have a look around at like your local GUE instructor or something, see if they're doing like a fundamentals course. There are obviously other training agencies out there. I'm sure people are going to comment down in the comments below about sort of how they did it. For me personally, it was basically my instructor who I learnt to dive with and ended up teaching with. He always used to dive twin sets and I just learnt from him, but I was living and breathing scuba diving at that point. So yeah, for most divers, yeah, sort of there are courses out there, but I don't think they're often called like twin set course, but yeah, if you search for something like GUE fundamentals, yeah, you should find a decent course for you. Ben Heckendorn says, thanks for your answer. I just thought they were a kind of all-rounder dSMB, but it would make sense to go for a 3-meter long dSMB if you were going to dive somewhere like in the Pacific Ocean. I guess I would get something around 140 centimeters. Yeah, so this was last week, I think. We were talking about dSMB lengths, and yeah, it mainly comes down to where you're diving. 140 centimeters is fairly standard, if a little bit long, to be honest, because my ones, so that's my travel dSMB. That's about 1 meter long when it's just fully inflated. By the time it's in the water and the bottom section is pulled under, it's probably closer to like 90, maybe 80 centimeters sticking out of the water. So that's good for, yeah, just clear, flat water. And you can see how it's been sun bleached, bless it, the poor thing. And another thing to look for is that this is a single piece of material. So the stitching and the heat weld is only on one side. The other side is just a fold, so that edge tends to wear a bit faster. So do be careful of that. You do need to replace them every so often. But as far as packing goes, that's so small, it fits in almost any pocket. Larger ones, I mean, that's probably about 1 meter plus a bit as well. Yeah, that's really your sort of your standard length. I think you can go up to like 180. That's like a large dSMB. 3 meter is by far the largest I've ever seen. So that's, yeah, for real high seas kind of adventure stuff. But 1 meter 40, yeah, it is a good all-rounder. I'd be quite happy using that sort of here in the UK, even in fairly rough weather. 180. As a general rule of thumb, you can't really go too big. It only comes down to how much storage space you have on you, and you don't want this huge thing just hanging on your side. but if I was ever kind of lost at sea, I'd rather a dSMB that was too big instead of not big enough. There was a case about a year or so ago where a diver was lost at sea, and even with search boats like really close in the water, they still couldn't see him. But if he had like a 1.8 meter long dSMB sticking out of the water, it would have really helped him be found and rescued that much sooner. But yeah, as a good all-rounder for like warm water like Red Sea, the Caribbean, that kind of sort of diving, yeah, 1.4 meters should be perfectly fine. Larry Goldsmith says, "Hi Mark, always love your videos. Why do you dislike brass bolt snaps? I've been saltwater diving with them for 20 years and I've never had a problem. Once every so often I shine them up with a product called Cape Cod metal polishing cloths and they shine like new. Also a bit of food quality silicone lubrication down the barrel. Thanks, Larry." It's kind of one of those, it's kind of an in-joke, but it's not. The main thing is that that brass is just a softer metal. I do have brass bolt snaps, but these are typically the ones that come free with cheaper dSMBs and stuff. But compared to like stainless steel, brass is just that little bit softer. And I do have one, is it that one? It's kind of bent, where the hook is just bent a little bit. And of course I do my best not to mistreat any of my, oh, that one's kind of bent as well, if you can see that. I do my best not to damage my equipment, obviously, look after it. And while yes, it is corrosion resistant, and yeah, if you use a Cape Cod fancy metal polishing cloth, I'm sure you can get them to shine up quite nicely. Personally, I quite like the kind of what's it called, patina effect to it. I like that, like aging of old brass. However, if I have a stainless steel bolt snap, I'll always choose it, hands down, just because it's a lot stronger. And it's less likely that, without my knowledge, that hook has bent to the point where the gate is permanently open and I sort of clip it off without thinking and then it unclips itself without my knowledge. It's just that it's going to be incredibly unusual for that to happen, as you've probably experienced in your 20 years of diving. I can't imagine it's happened that often, if at all, but in my mind, there is a chance. So if I do have a stainless steel, or if I have that choice, I'll go for the stainless steel. Would I, if I did have like brass bolt snaps, just go out and buy stainless steel ones to replace them? I definitely think about it, but only if it was sort of in my budget. I wouldn't just cast them aside. They do work. They wouldn't make them if they didn't work, but given the choice, I'll always choose stainless steel just because it's that much stronger and more reliable. David Bonishin asks, XDEEP or Halcyon? And that's it. That's a very succinct question. XDEEP or Halcyon? Both, really. They're both real like top tier brands, but whatever works for you in particular at that time. They're both great brands. One thing that I would say is Halcyon is more of a traditional brand, so they tend to stick to what divers know, those designs that have been proven to have worked over generations, and yeah, that's kind of what they stick to. No, don't get me wrong, they do some clever stuff. They do like carbon fiber backplates and things. They do have like modern twists and takes on things. But for a true like modern twist on traditional concepts, XDEEP is what they really do. They do have their Zeos range, which is the traditional backplate and wing setup, but in their like NX range, their Zen, their Project, their Ghost to a certain degree, is just that much more new and just different. Their backplate, instead of that traditional backplate shape, it is spread out, so it actually sort of is a bit more ergonomic on your back. The harness is designed to, your shoulder straps continue down towards the bottom of the backplate, which increases the amount of shoulder like space to get your arm in by 20%, but by raising the waistband to go over the top of those shoulder straps, when you actually do up that waistband, it holds those shoulder straps in and it tucks you into the BCD, so it does stay nice and tight, but you still have that room to move in and out. The crotch strap, they got that V or Y shaped crotch strap, so you now have 2 points of attachment points in the small of your back, and you don't have that single strap running straight down the center. Yeah, there's just lots of attention to details and little tweaks that actually do make things much more comfortable. Yeah, so they'll both do perfectly fine. XDEEP can be a bit less compatible with other brands. So if you're looking to mix and match certain things, sometimes that can be tricky, but that can be true of all brands, to be honest, because manufacturers kind of want you to stick with their brand. So they make the grommets just a little bit further apart or a little bit closer together so the holes don't line up with someone else's backplate. Kind of stuff like that. You see it all over the industry. They're actually trying to be a bit more universal nowadays, because the manufacturers, they know that customers, when they see universal like knife grommets on a BCD or something, they know that customers are more likely to go down that route than I'm going to force you to buy my brand's dive knife. So it is a bit of an issue, but as long as you double check and do the measurements and whatnot, you should be perfectly fine. But yeah, they are both top brands. Personally, if I was going to sort of reinvest in a new like lightweight sort of travel BCD or replace my my backplate system for my twin set, I probably would go down the XDEEP route, just because of those little tweaks and changes that just make life that much more comfortable. But saying that, there's nothing wrong with Halcyon. A lot of divers love the Blue H, so yeah, if it works for you, perfect. But personally, I just prefer XDEEP. And finally, onto the big question of the week that comes from everybody, probably in my mind, which is what's going on? Now, as you may or may not have noticed, all of my videos are now only being released once a week on a Sunday instead of a bunch of videos throughout the week. And the main reason for that is that I am leaving Simply Scuba at the end of the month. I'm moving over to Scuba Diver magazine to do very similar things and produce videos with them just on their channel. I've worked with them before during lockdown, where I was made redundant from Simply Scuba, and I started up my own channel. I also did a few videos with Scuba Diver magazine, but from August onwards I am going to be working for Scuba Diver magazine full time. Right now, behind the scenes, I've still been creating the usual amount of videos for Simply Scuba. I'm just releasing them once a week on a Sunday going forwards. So those are going to continue for a fair while after I've left. And right now we're discussing where I might continue to produce videos for Simply Scuba going forwards. But my main focus will, of course, be Scuba Diver magazine, and all of my new content as of August is going to be on the magazine's channel and their social media. As far as why, it's kind of something that I've been thinking about for a little while now, or quite a while to be honest, trying to move away from the retail side of scuba diving and its constraints, and going over to the magazine should give me a bit more flexibility when talking about the equipment and brands and things that are being released. Don't get me wrong, I've had a wonderful time working for Simply Scuba. They are a great company to work for. If you actually feel like you can fill the gap that I'm leaving, then by all means show your interest down in the comments below so that they can get a head start on the recruiting process, recruiting my replacement. But I have had a wonderful time helping you divers out there, and I'll continue to do that. But of course, working with the magazine, I'll start to make videos about the dive shows, spend a bit more time about those, showing you guys and girls sort of all the new stuff that's just being released at the dive shows, and just more subjects with broader reach and broader resources as well. For the immediate future, it will probably stick to a one video a week until they find a replacement, but you probably won't see another Ask Mark on this channel after today, just because of the way it's set up with me responding to your questions. I can't figure out your questions in the future. So I will start it up again on Scuba Diver magazine to answer your questions and chat with you guys and girls about scuba diving in the future. But if you use the Ask Mark hashtag here, I won't be able to see it. YouTube still hides comments with hashtags. I think it sees them as links, so it always hides those comments. So just leave the hashtag out or pop a comment on one of the magazine's videos and I'll find it over there in August. As a final goodbye, I'm actually going to be recording a final Decostock podcast with Sean, which should be good fun. And if you have any questions or anything that you'd like Sean to know, pop them down in the comments below as soon as possible so that I can give them to him when we record it. That'll be next week, so that we can talk about whatever you guys and girls want to chat about. That podcast will probably go live on the 31st of July, and we're going to be just our usual selves, just catching up and talking about our times at Simply Properly. But yeah, I am leaving Simply Scuba. You probably will continue to see my face here for a little bit while, but if you do want to get in contact with me, ask questions, all that kind of stuff, and of course see my future content going forwards, all of that is going to be going over to Scuba Diver Magazine's channel. Yeah, thank you for watching everybody, and of course, safe diving.